Hey, this is Dylan and Brendan from Wizards Talk, and we're here to talk about another disappointing loss for the Wizards. This time, 122 to 116 loss to the Phoenix Suns. A strong start, got up to a 22-point lead, ended up losing by six. It's kind of the Wizards we've come to know over the years, and we seem still to be stuck in that few years ago. And I thought we turned the page, and this year, especially after our 3-0 start, seemed like this was the year, the year we get to the Eastern Conference Finals, and losing three out of the last four, it just seems like we're back to square one. Um, and Scott Brooks and the team are going to have to do something to turn this ship around.
Yeah, I think um, the start to the season hasn't been terrible. I mean, it's certainly much better than last year, but I mean, in terms of what the team was supposed to be coming into this year, and even the Wizards preaching themselves that it's important they get off to a hot start with Celtics trying to, um, you know, get in their new pieces and get them going. Cleveland trying to get in their new pieces and get them going. So the Wizards even knew that they had to come out and make a strong statement. And so far, it's been Boston. Um, and it's still very early in the season, and the Wizards still have a lot of home games coming up um, over the next couple to few weeks. They have to take advantage of that. And it all starts Friday night with Cleveland. I'm happy we get Markeith back. That's going to help a lot, I think, in terms of the toughness. But like you said, this is just the team that we've come to know for a while. It shouldn't surprise anyone at this point. This is just who they are. Um, they surprise sometimes, they disappoint sometimes, but I think that everyone can agree that overall that this is still a very mentally weak team.
For sure. Just by the way, we'll be pointing out your comments throughout the night, so keep commenting. We'll talk about them. First one comes from Exiled Media saying coaching staff has to fix these issues with closing out. Yeah, Phoenix was 9 for 24 from three today. They were also from field goal. They were 41 for 83. So teams are hitting pretty easily on us. We're definitely going to have to step up the defense and just everything on the defensive end, not just closing out, but steals and rebounding and every aspect. We're for sure going to have to fix because this team, yes, we've got a talented bunch, but we still got to stop these other teams. I mean, Phoenix scored 122. I don't I don't know who scored what, but I know everybody's been scoring at least 100 points on us as of late, and it seems like everybody's doing it, and we've got no answer.
I will admit that I think part of that is just because I think that that's just kind of what the league is now. And while it's certainly a lot of Wizards' effort on defense, and I'm sure we'll touch in on a lot of different aspects throughout the stream here, but a lot of it is just because the offensive talent nowadays is just so much greater than the defensive talent. So we're going to see a lot more games of 100 or more points being scored. But going back, that doesn't excuse the effort that the Wizards show on the defensive end of the floor. As good as they are in the pick and roll, they can't defend it worth a damn. They don't step out on 3-point shots, and when they do, they still go in because you've already let them in a rhythm at that point. They don't respect other players. They absolutely do not. They don't respect. Um, and the thing about them, and it's ironic, is that they won't respect, but they don't give the respect in return. And you're just kind of setting yourself up to be put in a bad situation at that point because it's all going to come back to bite you. That's how this team has been. Um, Again, just very mentally weak. I haven't been impressed so far, and like I said earlier, I mean, I know we're 4-3 and above 500, but I mean, this team could very easily be 1-6 right now. The only good win that the Wizards have had so far are against the Kings, and they're not very good. You lose a game to the Suns, you lose a game to the Lakers, and you blow again another huge lead to the Golden State Warriors. I mean, so this team could be undefeated, but people also have to keep in mind that this team could also be 1-6. So
Yeah, we got to close games. And again, Exile Media asks, what do you guys believe needs to change in order for the Wizards to get respected as a top team? Got to be the way they finish. It's I mean, there's a lot, but we're in every game. We're leading at some point every game, and it seems like we've got control of each game. But each time we find a way to give it away, and it slips and it slips, and now we're 4-3, and in seventh place, in sole possession of seventh place in the Eastern Conference. Um, we're going to have to find ways to keep these leads and to continue to finish and find a way to win, unlike what we've been doing and finding a way to lose the game.
Yeah, I mean, I think just the simple answer to that question is win. I think it's sad that whenever the Wizards get a big league and everyone on Wizards Twitter is saying, oh, well, they're going to blow it, or, they're probably going to blow it. And it's sad that we have to think like that. And I know that this is a league where anything can happen, and that's another reason I love basketball the most. But it shouldn't happen on literally every night that the Wizards get a big lead like that. It happens every single time. So again, it just speaks to the mental toughness. And like I was telling you before this started, I think the only one that impressed me the entire game was Bradley Beal. And that's not just saying because he had 40 points. I didn't even know he had 40 points until after the game. I just base everything off the eye test, and if I need to refer to stats after, then I do. Kelly Oubre was very awful tonight. Jan Mahimi was awful. Tim Fraser was awful to me. I still am not a Tim Fraser fan. Jody Meeks didn't get enough playing time. I didn't utilize him enough. Mike Scott was the only bright spot off the bench to me. Oh, and I guess Satoransky, even though Satoransky didn't get much playing time either.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I mean, like you said, Beal had 40, but also we give up 40 to T.J. Warren, who's a great player. Really been helping this team a lot, but he's not a 40-point a game, 40-point a night kind of guy.
No.
So we would have had Oubre on him, who's supposedly a defensive monster and specializes in defense. And we didn't get it today. Oubre scores 8, and it's obvious his plus minus is 16, and we're calling for him to get more minutes, but he got 22 minutes, and we're saying he got more minutes, but minus 16. He's the only Wizard starter in the negative. And actually, another good point regarding plus minus is everybody on the bench is in the negative except for Satoransky. That probably means we gotta play Sato more, especially had a Tim Fraser who had the worst plus minus off the bench with minus 10. And we got to put Sato ahead of him in the rotation, make him coming off for Wall. I know he's not the same as as Frazier's exciting and as far as just overall abilities, but he's giving us good minutes right now, and we're gonna have to get something from the bench.
I think one of the bold statements, and I will say this, I do think by the end of the season that Satoransky will overtake Tim Fraser as the backup point guard. I know there was a lot of indifference from fans early on coming in, especially with that Markieff Morris, because there was no one really that aggressive on the bench to go in there and make plays. But now that you're going to be adding an aggressive Kelly Oubre back to the bench once Keith comes back, and Jody Meeks is actually a little bit more aggressive than I thought he was, and Mike Scott's been really aggressive. Jan Mahimi's an aggressive guy when he gets the ball down low, so you don't mind putting Sato in there. His shot's gotten a lot better. He makes a lot of really tough shots in the paint. Hook shots, floaters, anything. And he also is still a really good passer. He runs the break really well. He can also work as the ball handler or run the lane and get a layup. So Satoransky is a really fine player, and Tim Fraser is just not doing it right now. And I understand that Tim Fraser is probably a better ball handler, and he's probably a better passer than Satoransky. But when you consider size, you consider defensive ability, something the Wizards are lacking right now. Obviously, we've stated several times. I think that Satoransky will eventually overtake Fraser as the backup point guard spot, and I hope no one's surprised when it happens because Fraser's been awful.
Hey, Colin Glower says, why do all of my teams blow leads? Wizards twice in Penn State. Just gotta say, I'm sorry for you, man. Penn State should be in the college football playoff. Right now, they're one of the best 4 teams in the country. But back to Wizards, I mean, we're blowing leads just because we're not finishing like we talked about, and we're not taking pride in the defensive end. And I'm not taking pride in playing the whole game. I mean, we'll play in stretches, but often we'll fall apart and we'll just stop caring at certain moments, and that's when they creep back in. You know, we were up 22, they cut it down, they cut it down, they cut it down. They've got all the momentum, so even in the moment, as we continue to win, or as we continue to just let them creep back in, they're they're in the mode, and we got to get back in. And unfortunately, we're not able to do so. Now, Colin also says, and the Nats always suck in the playoffs. You know what? Can we say we're DC sports fans? Um, we're still going to get back to that championship series. I thought it was going to be the Wizards, especially after our 3-0 start. But now we're going to have to see what happens.
Yeah, I would like to point out, though, that I'm not a Redskins fan, so I'm not an all DC sports guy, but I mean, I'm a Giants fan, so not much better. But I mean, going back to that Penn State thing, hey, Saquon Barkley, future Giant. I'm waiting for it.
Well, we've got we've got Cleveland coming up Friday, and it's going to be played on ESPN. Cleveland's currently 3-5, and right now they're a lottery team, and they're not in the playoff picture. I know it's early on in the season, but what do you think that we need to do in this early game against a Cleveland team that's not where they need to be? What do we need to do to make sure that we take advantage of the opportunity and that we don't fall back like they have early on in the season?
I think the story with this game is going to be like it is with most Wizards games, and it's just about effort. Um, Several times, this team shows that they can hang with any team in the league, and then they have those mental lapses like we talked about, and they just don't do it. But I think if you come out with enough effort, again, Cleveland is a team like they're allowed to say, we don't really care about the regular season games because you know they're going to show up in the postseason. The Wizards, the past couple times they played Cleveland, they've acted like the hungrier team, and I certainly hope they take that approach on Friday. And if they do, they should come out with a win. And as we've seen over the last couple of years, offensively, they kind of go toe to toe. It's those mental lapses and the small bit of defensive errors that lets Cleveland win the game. But I mean, as long as they just fire shot for shot, and they show more effort than Cleveland, I think that'll be fine. But will they play the entire 48 minutes hard? Who knows? That's up for them. And then, I mean, after that, then you got Toronto. So, I mean, it could either be really good next two games, or it could be really bad. It's entirely up to them. And that's the thing that everyone has to understand in situations like these. The Wizards are not a bad team. They are soft mentally. They're very weak mentally.
For sure, we're definitely gonna have to just continue to. I know it's a tough stretch we got going on for sure, but we're gonna have to use this as an opportunity to take advantage of some struggling teams. Like we said, Cleveland's third to last in the East. Toronto, they're 4-2 right now, but they're still vulnerable for sure. So we've got some games that are certainly gonna take part in the playoff picture and be a part of where we end up going, whether it be as far as Eastern Conference standings or just overall our overall physique. Um, Headless comments, DC pissing me off, LMAO. It's pissing all of us off, man. We put so much into it, and I know the players do as well. But it's just tough time after time for us to continually be losing the games that we should be winning and losing these opportunities that we have to prove that we are a great team and a great sports city. It is just disappointing to watch, and we'll get there. I don't know when we're going to get there, especially after this tough stretch. I hope it's this year, and I hope we can rebound, but we're going to have to pay attention because we're not guaranteed anything.
No, and I will partially point out too that with the game tonight, the refs were absolutely terrible. They were terrible. They were absolutely awful. And I'm not saying that's the reason they lost, but they were terrible.
So, as we look at the Eastern Conference standings, you've got Boston on top, followed by Orlando, Toronto, Indiana, Detroit, Charlotte, Washington, and Milwaukee. What's your What's your outlook on Orlando? They're definitely a team that's surprised some people thus far into the season, and they seem to be playing well. They're performing really well against teams. What's your thoughts on them and where they stand in the East?
Um, I mean, I don't want to call it luck with how they've started out. Okay, look, they're playing hard. Um, they're playing team basketball, and that's what's getting them wins. And they're still a pretty decent defensive team. Obviously, I think whenever you have Frank Vogel as your head coach, you're going to be a pretty solid defensive team. Will they hold it up? Absolutely not. I did, however, tell people that coming into the year that Orlando perhaps had the best bench in the Eastern Conference. And by the end of the season, that may be something that sticks. I mean, I know Cleveland's bench will eventually be fine or whatever, but will it be as good as Orlando's? I don't know. Shelvin Mack is really solid. He's been good for them. Maurice Spates, when he gets the minutes, he's good. Biombo has been all right. Um, Jonathan Isaac has been decent when he's gotten the minutes. So, I mean, they have pieces there on the bench and in the starting lineup. You still have guys like Fournier, Terrence Ross, DJ Augustine has been the starter with Alfred Payton out. Aaron Gordon, who's been really, really good this year, and Vucevic, who is one of the top centers in the Eastern Conference. So they're a very good team. Do I think that they're a team that anyone should be concerned about in the postseason? I don't think so. I think that everyone pretty much has the top four teams in the East, most likely, and should be coming down to Toronto, Washington, Boston, and Cleveland. And none of those other teams are going to give. I mean, outside of Orlando, none of those other teams are going to give any of those four teams problems in the postseason. So, I think in the end, it's just going to kind of come down to those four and the seeding for those four, and it's absolutely going to matter. I think we saw last year in the playoffs in the conference semis against the Celtics and the Wizards. That series probably could have gone either way, and the home court definitely mattered. Every home team won in that series, so I think that's extremely important. And I think all four teams know that, but I think especially with Cleveland's situation, it's going to be easier for them to get into a rhythm than it is the Wizards, simply because they have more talent. The Wizards have to realize this. Boston has certainly picked it up. They've won 6 in a row now after starting 0-2. So very encouraging for Celtics fans. The Bucks started off kind of good, but they've now lost 2 in a row. So we'll see what happens there. And then, the Raptors are what they always are, good in the regular season, and then probably a complete mind fuck in the playoffs. But we'll see how they do. But right now, you ask me about Orlando. Like, am I worried? Are they going to finish like high in the playoffs or anything? Nah. Enjoy it while it lasts, Orlando fans.
Hey, just want to thank Jack Hunter for turning into the show. Says regular season doesn't matter. I mean, when you're Golden State and Cleveland, maybe it doesn't matter when you know you're going to be in the playoffs and you know you're going to be able to make a run. But when you're Washington,
Or San Antonio.
the playoffs matter for us. I mean, it proved it last year in the 7-game series against Boston. We lost Game 7, and partially because we didn't have home court. Boston fans are rowdy, they're loud, and they just happened to have a night, and we didn't. And they moved on to the conference championship, and our streak continues. So for a team like us, the regular season does matter because we still need to build and get to where we want to be, and we're going to have to do that as well by putting ourselves in a position to get to the conference championship or get to the NBA finals. It certainly matters for us, especially when you're the 7th seed in the East on the border of the. I know it's early in the season, but border of not making the playoffs.
Yeah, what if you're not San Antonio, Cleveland, or Golden State, and I guess to some extent Houston, you have to be concerned about where your seating is going to be. Especially if you're Washington. You cannot keep losing these types of games. If you do, you're going to wind up without home court. And that is something the Wizards cannot have going into this year after having such high expectations. I'll take a 3 seed at minimum. But I think especially if they want to try and get over that hump, the way Cleveland is struggling, if they continue to struggle like this, then they really need to get it in their heads. They need to get that 1 seed, because if they can do that, then, the sky's the limit. And if they lose, But the main thing right now with this team is just it's just been about effort, and it's extremely discouraging.
And Colin Brower says, well, he was asking who we got in the World Series. Right now, the Astros are up 5-0. So I'm going to go with Houston. That's what I got. Who you got, Brendan?
I'm gonna be quite honest. Like, I'm not a big baseball guy, so like I have no idea what's going on. Like, I pay attention to like the Nationals when they play or whatever, but if it's not them, then I honestly could care less. So.
And Jack says, Wiz will be okay. They're just paying too much people to get enough depth or front court size. I mean, yeah, you could say we're paying people too much, but the problem is we're paying three guys the max, and they're all deserving of it. But unfortunately, I mean, you can't argue with that because Wall and Beal are 100% deserving, and Otto's really playing well this year.
I am not. I'm still with this. I get that Beal may be a max player now, but at the time he received it was not max worthy at all. Was not at all. And I get that Otto's like a perfect piece or whatever next to these two, but is Otto a max player either? No, he's not. Sorry. I mean, and I know some people are going to agree with me. Like, a lot of people probably aren't just because they're homers or whatever, but like, some of you guys have to come to an agreement. And I understand that that's what the league is now, and like, a lot of players get these big max contracts or whatever. I think Harrison Barnes is probably the one that started it all, but Otto is not a max player. Beal is probably a max player now, but I'm just saying, like, at the time he received it, he was not. I understand that, like, when you hand out max contracts, you're thinking about what they're going to become over the next few years and in that contract. So I get it. Like, I do. But I'm just saying, like, at the time, not worth the money. And it kind of, it kind of financially kind of holds them a little bit going forward because we still have Jan Mahimi, whose contract is the big holder right now. Gortat you'll kind of live with because Gortat is such a big fit. But, I mean, outside of that, I mean, they're really not paying anyone a whole lot of money. Markeith's salary is still like $8 million. I think it's like 8.4, 8.6, it's something like that. It's in between there for this season. So that's not a lot, but they're going to have to pay him if they want to retain him. If they want to get Cousins, they're going to have to shed both Gortat and Mahimi's contract. But even then, and even if you sign Cousins or another guy to a big contract, and again, that still puts you in kind of a tough position. So the Wizards are in a tough spot financially, but I don't think you can say that, oh, they're paying guys too much, because the Wizards weren't in a situation either to just let any of these guys walk and let them sign with other teams, because then they're really going to be bad. I mean, imagine if the Wizards didn't re-sign Beal. Imagine if they didn't re-sign Porter. Imagine if they just hadn't extended Wall over the summer. I mean, this team could have really been heading in a bad direction. So, well, I understand that, like, also some of these guys may not be worth the money. You also have to think ahead and say, okay, well, what happens if we lose them? And I think that's what the Wizards were thinking when paying those guys and paying guys like Jan Mahimi. So, yeah, I'm kind of indifferent about it, but I understand that when people say that we pay players too much. But, I mean, that's just what the league is now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, our three guys, Wall, Beal, Otto, you got to pay them because, like you said, Beal may have not been worth it at the time. Otto going into the season may have not been worth it, but now certainly it looks like they're worth it. And if we don't sign them, what do we do? You got to make – if you choose to not give them the money, you're going to have to make a move to compensate for it. And who knows what we would have done. So looking at it right now, it seems like, we made the right decision because we're in a better spot right now than what we would have been had we not done it. Now, could we have made better moves? Yes. But it's not possible for us to win without doing something. And for all we know, that was really the only option.
Yep, and that's what people have to realize. That it wasn't about, like, are they worth that money? It was about what is the alternative. And I think that's something that, like, fantasy fans have a problem with sometimes, is not coming to the reality that, okay, well, if we lose this player, we're going to take a big hit. And I mean, a lot of people forget too, like, had we not maxed Otto, we still would have been pretty stuck financially. So Um, you take the bird rights with a grain of salt, go over the cap without penalty, but still kind of put you in a logjam. But I think that the Wizards bench this year is just fine. They're just fine.
Besides that, they were all in the minus today, but I
Yeah,
guess we can get that out.
I mean, the whole. It's probably all defense. I mean, the whole team's defense. I mean, is pretty bad, and they're obviously not as talented as the starters. But I mean, as a core, I mean, you have guys that can distribute the ball, can handle the ball. I mean, Fraser and Sato can both do that. You have scorers on the bench. I think when you get Oubre back, then you have Oubre and Meeks on the bench. You have Mike Scott in there, who's a do-it-all player. You have the defensive presence with Scott and Mahimi. I believe he stops gambling on every single freaking play. I mean, they have the assets there. They just have to utilize them properly and play for a consistent 48 minutes. But it all starts in the head. If it's not, cemented in your head that you're going to play for 48 minutes, then you're not going to get the result you want in the end. And that's just the situation that the Wizards are in. They don't have the ability like Cleveland or Golden State to say, don't care, because they're not as talented as them. And they have to realize that. It's like sometimes they think they're this really good team and this inferior team. And like they can't be beaten, they can't be stopped, and then they go out there and they lose to the Lakers and the Suns. It's like you can't make that stuff up. And again, I understand it's early in the season, but these are games that you have to have because down the line they are going to matter. What if we go down the line and it's a 1 seed and we're tied at the end of the season, but Boston wins on the last night and they get the number 1 seed because they didn't handle these 2 stupid road games early in the year. I mean, these games matter, especially for seeding down the road. Those last few weeks, 2 weeks, anything can happen in terms of seeding. So everyone has to be aware of that. So I understand like when some people say the regular season doesn't matter because to some extent it doesn't. But if you're the Wizards and you want to try and get a high seed so that you can go through the playoffs more smoothly than years prior, you have to take these games seriously.
Yeah, you made a good point about the bench. Mike Scott had 12 points, 8 rebounds. Jan Mahimi had 6 rebounds, 2 points, an assist, a block. Tim Frazier had 6 points, 3 assists, 2 rebounds, 2 steals. Sato had 6 points, 2 assists, and Meeks had 6 points, 2 assists. Um, so we're getting something out of the bench for sure, but that plus minus doesn't look good. Combined for a minus 21 off the bench, and but one consistent positive is your boy Mike Scott. Great addition, continues to play well. Was one for 2 for 3, 5 of 11 from field goal. His only free throw. Although he was -1, he's providing valuable minutes off the bench, and he's somebody that we're really able to look to, and he's been reliable, especially for what we got him for.
I kept trying to tell people, Mike Scott was the pickup of the offseason. This is, I don't think it's Atlanta Hawks Mike Scott, but I think it's the next closest thing that we can get, and he's still very good. And who knows, maybe he becomes Atlanta Mike Scott. We haven't seen a poster dunk yet, and when that happens, then maybe we can call it Atlanta Mike Scott. But this is still a very good version of himself. Again, he can play the 4, he can play the 5. He's good. Defensively, he can take you off the dribble. If you play him too tight, he can score in the post. He can hit the 3. He can definitely hit the mid-range off the pick and pop. So he's just an all-around good player. And again, he played 30-some minutes tonight, I think 32. He's going to get a lot of minutes with the starters. I figured this would happen. And now when Keith comes back, you can kind of roll out with a lineup of, maybe perhaps Wall, Beal, Porter, Scott, and Morris. And how fun is that going to be?
Yeah, we miss Morris. I don't think people realize Morris is to our team, but once he comes back, we're gonna see it for sure. Now, my question to you is: the last time we did this, the Wizards started off the season 3-0 after a win over Detroit, right? The third one was at Detroit.
Denver.
Denver, yes. So last time we did this, was our third consecutive win, and it was against the Denver Nuggets. Now, after the break between our streams, what's your projection for this year's Wizards, and where do you see them finishing?
I still think it's very possible. I still think it's very possible for them to get into the 50 wins. Same projection. I mean, the Wizards weren't going to come out like 7-0 or anything, even though they probably could be. But reality situation is that down the line, you would expect that this team picks up some of their bad habits. Some of the bad habits of this team we've just seen over the years, and I think that's just going to stick until the John Wall era is over, and it just is what it is. I mean, it is what it is. And it's not a knock on him, it's not a knock on Brad, it's not a knock on Otto, it's not a knock on anything, but just collectively as a group, they just have some bad habits that they're probably never going to knock. But this team is still a 50-win team, still a 50-55 in between their win team. My projection doesn't change. Can they get to the Eastern Conference Finals still? Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at the teams right now. I mean, all these teams are still really soft. I mean, what's the one team you can say right now, like absolutely that would beat Washington in the series? Can absolutely beat Washington in the series. They may be favorited, but would you be comfortable going out there and saying, like, comfortably that, oh, you're going to lose to this team? You can't say that. So, still encouraging talent-wise, but effort-wise, I mean, if they keep playing like this for the rest of the season, then their season could come up rather short. But, I mean, talent-wise, sky's to the limit, still 50-55 win team. My opinion doesn't change.
I don't know. After this stretch, I think we're a 51-win tops. Even if we're able to figure it out Friday against Cleveland and then in the following game against Toronto, I don't think that – I think 51 is the cap. I think this team is going to have at least another stretch, maybe 2 more stretches of something similar, where unfortunately we just are unable to perform too well, and where this kind of continues. Definitely just I think 51's a cap. Now, as far as where can we go, I think our cap or peak is definitely the Eastern Conference Finals. We'll say that. I think realistically, it's the semis. As a huge fan, as a Wizards fan, I'd love to get into the finals, but we gotta look at where we are. Maybe, hopefully, this is just a rough stretch where we're not playing as good as we should be, but you never know.
Yeah, I think that their ceiling is probably the Eastern Conference Finals as well. But I mean, I was just saying in general, like, can you definitively say that any of these teams are better than the Wizards right now if they were to play in the playoff series? And you can't say that. And if you do, I mean, you're wrong. But I mean, you also can't say that about any of these other teams. Like, you can't say that about Cleveland, and you can't say that about Boston either. So, I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, I do agree that the ceiling is probably the conference finals. I mean, whoever they play, they'd probably be overwhelmed and lose. But, I mean, you have to like where the Wizards are in terms of talent in comparisons to some of these other teams. And I know Boston's won 6 or whatever, but Boston still does not impress me. And I have no idea why they keep winning these games. I mean, they played the Kings tonight, so, yeah, whatever. But teams are going to figure out that, hey, they have Kyrie Irving, and so I think teams will pick that up. Jason Tatum has been nice. Jaylen Brown has been nice. But, I mean, like, are those guys that, like, you really went down the stretch in a playoff series, like, your offense running through them? Like, no, probably not. I mean, people forget, like, Al Horford was the second best player in the playoffs last season. Like, is that going to save you in the playoffs? I sure hope not.
Do you have any closing comments before we shut this thing down?
Yes, I do think that they are going to turn it around. It may not come in the next week or two, but I think that we're going to see another big run like we did last season. It's just going to take them a couple games to realize that they should be beating these teams. I do think they'll turn it around, but it just may take some time. But have faith, Wizards fans.
Hey, all I got to say is, worst that happens is it doesn't work out and we find ourselves in the Eastern Conference semis. But we're gonna make the playoffs. You know, this is just a stretch we're going through. Um, we'll be able to do it. We'll figure it out. I trust John and Beal, and with Keith coming back, we're gonna be able to move Smith to the bench and have an extra piece coming off the bench, and Keith brings what Keith brings, and that's great for us. Um, so definitely a positive outlook on the season, even after this tough stretch. But we'll see where it could take us, and I think it's still going to be a great season.
For sure, for sure. I'm excited.
All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it as always. Keep up with us and go Wizards.